I thought he loved me, until I found my own death certificate hidden in his secret box. One marriage. One lie. One night she pretended to sleep, and everything unraveled. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Her name is Maya Grant. A quiet woman in her early 30s, with warm hazel eyes and a life that once seemed ordinary. She worked, she loved, she trusted. Until the night she pretended to sleep, and everything unraveled beneath her. My heart was beating so hard it felt like the mattress might be trembling beneath me. I kept my breath slow, steady, shallow enough to pass for sleep, even as the bitter taste of the tea still clung to the back of my tongue. For weeks, I had ignored that taste. Tonight, I let it tell me the truth. Ethan thought I was gone, just like every other night. He waited longer this time, standing in the doorway, watching me with that stillness I used to mistake for tenderness. He whispered my name, soft at first, then louder. When I didn't stir, he moved. His footsteps were careful, rehearsed, as though he had walked this route 100 times before. I listened. The faint drag of wood across carpet. The shift of air when he pressed his shoulder against the tall bookcase. Then, the sound that turned my blood cold, a sharp click, the kind of sound a latch makes when it's freed from a secret. He pulled the shelf away from the wall. I risked the smallest slit of an eye. Just enough to see him crouch low, his hand reaching into a space I didn't know existed. For 6 years we had lived in this house, and I thought I knew every crack in its foundation. I was wrong. Ethan pulled out a velvet-lined box, dark as the night pressing against our windows. He set it gently on the floor, like it was fragile, like it was precious. My husband, my soft-spoken, warm-smiled husband, opened that box, and in the dim light I saw things that didn't belong to him. Things that didn't belong to us. Wedding rings. At least 4 of them, each different. Some plain, some engraved. A child's hospital bracelet with faded writing I couldn't make out. 3 slim USB drives labeled with dates in neat, deliberate handwriting. And then the one thing that made the room tilt beneath me, a folded piece of paper stamped with the seal of the Oregon Health Department. A death certificate. My death certificate. With my name. With my birth date. And a date of death marked 1 week from tonight. My lungs locked. My mouth wanted to scream, but I forced myself into silence. Because Ethan wasn't finished. He ran a fingertip across the paper like he was caressing it, like it was already true. Then he took out a small syringe case, polished steel catching the weak light. He didn't open it, but he held it as though he was weighing it in his palm, considering something final. And then, softly, to himself, he whispered, Thursday. Not today. Not tomorrow. Thursday. I watched his lips form the word. I heard the cadence shift, the softness of Ethan gone, replaced with an accent I had never heard in all our years together. Crisp, deliberate, foreign. As though a stranger had taken his place inside the man I loved. He pulled out his phone. The glow lit his face in harsh blue angles, no warmth in his features, only calculation. He opened a thread saved under a single name, Halcyon. And I read the words as he typed them. Everything's ready. No complications. The message sent, and the phone buzzed in his hand. A reply. Too fast to be coincidence. Too fast to be anything but a plan already in motion. I clenched my fists beneath the blanket, nails digging into my palms, desperate to stay still. My heart begged me to run. My body begged me to move. But I lay there, a ghost in my own bed, watching the man I trusted with my life prepare for the end of it. Ethan reached for the hospital bracelet. He lifted it from the box, turned it in his fingers, and murmured words I couldn't fully catch. Only fragments. No more mistakes, no more errors. He slipped it into his pocket as though it belonged to him, as though it mattered more than anything else in that box. Then he packed it all away. Every ring, every drive, every piece of evidence that my husband wasn't my husband at all. He slid the velvet case back into the hollow, pressed the shelf flush with the wall, and stood still for a moment, listening. Listening for me. listening for proof that his little potion had worked. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I became the silence. Ethan brushed the dust from his hands, tapped his phone screen again, and walked past our bed. For the briefest second, he paused. His shadow bent over me, his breath almost touching my cheek. And in that moment, I felt the smile. I couldn't see it, but I felt it, the curve of a mouth that no longer belonged to the man I had married. He whispered, softer than before. Sleep well, Maya. And then the door clicked shut, and I was left with the truth that my husband was planning to kill me. 3 weeks earlier, my nights felt ordinary. Comforting, even. 9 o'clock sharp, Ethan would call out from the kitchen, his voice wrapped in warmth, tea's ready. It was always the same ritual. The blue ceramic mug. The honey drizzled in a slow spiral. The steam curling between us like a promise. I used to think of that mug as a symbol of love. Now, I think of it as the beginning of the end. That week had been brutal at work. Endless deadlines, donors breathing down my neck, spreadsheets that refused to balance no matter how many times I stared at them. When I came home, Ethan had dinner waiting. Pasta, roasted vegetables, a glass of red wine poured just the way I liked it. He always noticed the details. Always got it right. But the tea had changed. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a stronger batch. Maybe the water boiled too long. But underneath the chamomile, beneath the honey, was a taste that didn't belong. Metallic. Bitter. A trace of something sharp that clung to the back of my throat. I remember the first night I truly noticed it. I sat at the kitchen counter, wrapping my hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. Ethan leaned across from me, his elbows on the table, watching me take that first sip. His eyes softened when I drank. He smiled, like a man proud of a small but perfect ritual. Long day? He asked. I nodded. You could say that. He reached across, brushed his thumb against my wrist. Then you need your rest. Finish your tea. The words were gentle, but the way he said them, it was as if the tea mattered more than my answer, as if he was waiting for something. I drank. I always drank. And 30 minutes later, my head grew heavy, my eyelids thick as stone. I would climb the stairs, collapse into bed, and the world would vanish. Not sleep. Not rest. Something deeper. Something closer to unconsciousness. When I woke, the mornings felt off. My body was groggy, sluggish, as if I had lost hours of myself in a place I couldn't remember. My phone would sometimes be on the wrong side of the bed. My laptop closed when I swore I'd left it open. The framed photo on my nightstand angled differently. Small things, almost nothing at all. But enough to feel wrong. One morning, I stood staring at my reflection, toothbrush hanging forgotten in my hand, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Stress, I thought. That's all. Just stress. That's what people said when the pieces of their lives didn't quite fit together. Still, the doubts grew. And then came the news story. A headline flashing across my phone while I waited for my coffee to brew. Local woman killed in windstorm accident. The article showed a smiling brunette, her hair dark like mine, her shoulders squared with the same quiet confidence. She had been walking across a footbridge when a sudden gust threw her against the rail. They called it a tragedy. A freak accident. I scrolled through the details, unsettled without knowing why. Maybe because she looked like me. Maybe because, even as the coffee dripped, I couldn't shake the thought that her story wasn't finished. That night, Ethan brought me my tea as always. He set it down in front of me, kissed the top of my head, and said the words I'd come to hear almost every night. Drink up. You'll feel better. I lifted the mug to my lips, and this time, the bitterness was unmistakable. By the time the second week rolled around, I couldn't keep the unease to myself anymore. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. Someone who knew me better than anyone. That person was Jules. Jules had been my anchor for years, my coffee break confidant, my partner in late-night phone calls, the one who always reminded me that even in chaos, there was room for laughter. She had a nurse's calm, the kind that steadies a room just by breathing in it. But that day, as we sat together in a corner cafe, the calm belonged to her, and the storm was mine. I stirred my iced tea until the lemon slice at the bottom broke apart. "I think something's wrong with me," I said, not quite looking at her. "Either that, or I don't know." Her eyes sharpened. "Tell me." So I did. I told her about the heaviness that swallowed me every night, about the way objects in the house seemed to move when I slept. I told her about the taste in the tea. The bitter edge. The way Ethan watched me drink. Jules set her sandwich down, untouched. "Maya," she said slowly, "that doesn't sound like you being tired. That sounds like something else." I shook my head, half laughing, because saying it out loud felt absurd. "What, you think he's drugging me? Ethan? He makes my tea every night. He's been doing it since before we were married. It's just our thing." Her mouth tightened. "That's exactly why you wouldn't notice if something changed." For a moment, the world tilted. Because hearing her say it, plain, blunt, without hesitation, made the idea less ridiculous and more real. Jules leaned closer. "Do this. Control the variable. Make your own tea tonight. Use your own mug. If you still feel the same way, then maybe it's something else. Stress, hormones, lack of sleep. But if you don't," she let the words hang. I stared at her, half wanting to believe, half wanting to forget. "And if I'm right? If it's the tea?" She didn't answer immediately. She just reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and for once her voice trembled. "Then you need to know the truth. No matter how much it hurts." There was something in her tone, something unspoken, heavy, personal. I saw it in her eyes before she said it. "I've been where you are," Jules whispered. "I was with someone once who wasn't who he claimed to be. I lost things I'll never get back because I ignored the signs. I won't let that happen to you." The cafe noise buzzed around us, plates clinking, milk steaming, people laughing about ordinary things. But in that moment, the world narrowed to the space between us. Jules, warning me with the weight of her own scars. Me, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. That night, I followed her advice. I boiled the water myself. I measured the honey. I poured the tea into a plain white mug instead of the blue ceramic Ethan always used. I carried it to the table, heart pounding like I was smuggling contraband in my own kitchen. When Ethan came in, he smiled the way he always did. "I was just about to make your tea." "I already did," I said lightly, pretending it was no big deal. His smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. But then he nodded, slow, careful. "Good. You're learning to take care of yourself." We sat across from each other, sipping in silence, but when he reached for the honey jar, sliding it across the table toward me, his eyes locked on mine. "Don't forget the honey," he said. The words weren't a suggestion. They were a command. And that was when I knew Jules was right. That night, I decided I wasn't going to just wonder anymore. I needed proof. Not suspicion, not paranoia, proof. I angled my phone on the dresser, careful to hide the small blinking light under a stack of folded laundry. It captured the bed, the door, most of the room. I pressed record just before Ethan brought me my tea. "Extra honey tonight," he said, smiling as he set the blue mug beside me. "You look like you need it." I forced myself to smile back, though my stomach twisted. I lifted the cup, let the bitterness scrape across my tongue, swallowed just enough to sell the lie, then set it down. "You're right. I'm exhausted," I murmured. And for once, I wasn't acting. The weight pressed down almost immediately. Within minutes, my head lolled against the pillow. My limbs went heavy. My eyes fluttered shut. But my mind stayed awake. I kept my breathing slow, steady. Listened as he moved, the sound of the lamp clicking off. The creak of the door as he left. The faint murmur of his voice in the distance. And then, after what felt like an eternity, footsteps again. Soft. Careful. Ethan appeared in the frame. My phone caught everything. He stood over me, staring. For a long moment, he just looked at me, as though memorizing my face. Then he leaned down, whispered my name. Maya. I didn't stir. He touched my shoulder, gave it a gentle shake. Still, I stayed limp, motionless. That was when I saw it, the flicker across his mouth. A smile. Not the warm, familiar smile I knew. No, this one was colder. Like a mask slipping. Satisfied, he straightened. And then he moved. He walked to my dresser, opened the drawer, and pulled out my purse. He sat on the edge of our bed, methodical, deliberate. He emptied the contents onto his lap, driver's license, credit cards, work badge. One by one, he lifted them, holding each to his phone, the screen glowing blue as he photographed them. Every snap of the camera felt like a violation. Like pieces of my life were being stolen in silence while I lay there, powerless. But he wasn't finished. Ethan crossed the room, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. Without hesitation, he typed in my password. My password, the one based on a private joke from years ago, a joke only he and I knew. He entered it in one smooth motion, no pause, no guess. The screen lit up, and he began to scroll. Documents, emails, spreadsheets from work. He paused to take photos of donor lists, financial records, correspondence with board members. It wasn't random. He knew exactly what he was looking for. The minutes dragged into an hour. My body screamed to move, to sit up, to demand answers, but I forced myself still. Every part of me frozen in feigned sleep, while my world was stripped bare in front of me. And then something else. He opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside was a small silver locket, old and worn. My mother's. A piece of her I had carried since the day she died. Ethan turned it over in his hands, thumb brushing across the engraving. MG plus MG, 1994. Miriam Grant. Maya Grant. My mother. Me. He opened the locket, gazed at the faded picture inside, then, click, photographed it too. I felt tears burning the back of my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall. When he was done, he closed the locket carefully, almost reverently, and set it back exactly where he'd found it. Then he moved to the bookshelf. His hand pressed against the wood. My breath caught in my throat. But before he could open the hidden panel, his phone buzzed. A message. He glanced at the screen, typed a quick reply, and shut everything down. He replaced my things, set my purse neatly on the dresser, and finally, slid into bed beside me. His arm brushed mine. His breathing slowed, and he slept, as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. Because now I had proof. The next morning, when Ethan left for his run, I stayed behind. My hand shook as I closed the door behind him, waiting until the sound of his footsteps faded down the block. I had only 20 minutes before he came back, maybe less. I went straight to the bookshelf. I pressed my palms against the wood, searching for what I had seen the night before. The faint scuffs at the base. The tiny hairline seam I'd never noticed. My fingers trembled, tracing the edge until I found it, the smallest notch, almost invisible. I slid my nail into it, pulled, and the latch gave way with a soft click. The shelf groaned as I moved it, the weight dragging against the floor. And there it was. A hollow carved into the wall itself. A space that wasn't supposed to exist. Inside sat the box. Velvet-lined, dark, and deliberate. I knelt, my breath shallow, and opened it. What I saw inside made the air leave my lungs. The wedding rings. 4 of them. Different sizes, different styles. Each one glinted with its own story, each one whispering a life I didn't recognize. Women I didn't know. Vows that had nothing to do with me. The hospital bracelet, worn and faded, the writing smudged. It was so small. A child's wrist, not an adult's. I lifted it carefully, felt the brittle plastic bend, and for the first time, I wondered if Ethan's lies reached back further than me. Then the drives. 3 slim USBs, each labeled in neat black ink. Dates. No names, no titles, just dates. I slipped one into my pocket before I even realized what I was doing. My fingers acted faster than my mind. I needed it. I needed to know. Beneath them, paper. Dozens of documents, some folded, some clipped. Obituaries cut from newspapers, each one with notes scribbled in Ethan's handwriting. Tiny corrections, arrows, underlines. Copy editor missed middle initial. Wrong school detail. Fix before archive. I flipped to the next sheet, and my stomach dropped. A spreadsheet. Columns stretched across the page, names at the left, notes on the right. Target. Similarity index. Insurance value. Disposition. Each line was a person. Each name belonged to a life dissected and reduced to numbers. And then I saw mine. Maya Grant. Face match, 86%. Widow narrative. Thursday, Riverbend. My chest tightened until I thought it might cave in. Riverbend. The same bridge from the news story. The same one where that woman had died. I forced myself to turn the page, my hands slick with sweat. And that was when I saw them, the audio notes. Typed transcripts pulled from voice recordings. Ethan's voice, casual, clinical. Updates on progress. Notes on timing. Sometimes his accent slipped, sharp and foreign. One line repeated across them all, like a mantra: eliminate errors. Eliminate liabilities. I sank against the wall, clutching the papers to my chest. I wasn't just imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. Ethan wasn't who he said he was. I slid everything back into the box, my heart pounding with every second I lost. Rings, papers, bracelet, all of it, except the USB I kept hidden in my pocket. I pushed the box into the hollow, slammed the shelf back into place, and wiped the dust from my hands. By the time Ethan returned, sweaty and smiling, I was standing at the stove, pretending to fry eggs. My voice didn't shake when I said, "Good run?" He kissed my cheek, breathing heavy, his skin damp with sweat. "Cleared my head," he said. "I feel better now." I forced a smile, though inside, I was screaming. Because while he felt better, I knew the truth. Thursday. Riverbend. My name on a page that read like an obituary waiting to happen. And I had 3 days left to stop it. That night, when Ethan fell asleep beside me, I slipped out of bed with the stealth of someone who had everything to lose. The USB burned in my pocket, heavy with secrets I hadn't yet seen. I padded down the hallway, careful to avoid the creaky board outside the guest room, and slid the drive into my laptop. The folder tree opened instantly, as if it had been waiting for me. No passwords, no encryption, no hesitation, just a neat grid of files with dates, like entries in a diary. I clicked the first one. A voice filled the room. Ethan's voice. Familiar, but stripped of its warmth. Cold. Flat. Professional. Target secured. Subject compliant. Initial ingestion successful. No suspicion. My hands trembled against the keys. The recording continued, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. Halcyon directive: collect. Verify. Transition. Errors not tolerated. Eliminate liabilities. Maintain schedule. Halcyon. The name seared itself into my mind. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a company I'd ever heard of. But it was real enough that Ethan reported to it, like a soldier filing orders to a commanding officer. I clicked the next file. Subject assets reviewed. Financials secure. Workplace credentials cloned. Widow narrative will pass inspection. Insurance beneficiaries aligned. Thursday, execution window remains optimal. Execution window. I pressed my hand over my mouth, choking back the sound that wanted to tear out of me. And then, a detail. Something new. No repeat of Seattle error. No exposure. Hale reviewing adjustments personally. Must not fail. Seattle. A word I had seen in one of the clipped obituaries. A missing woman with hair like mine. I clicked again, and again, each file unraveling a little more of the truth. Halcyon wasn't random. Halcyon was an engine, a machine that manufactured death on paper. Their business wasn't life, it was erasure. They didn't just kill people. They built exits. Clean, convincing, official. The kind of deaths that slipped into the folds of bureaucracy and disappeared without question. Insurance payouts. Inheritance transfers. Vacant homes swept clean. Each subject wasn't just a victim, they were an account. A transaction. A product. And Ethan, my Ethan, wasn't a husband at all. He was an operator. A collector. A man who walked into women's lives, harvested everything they were, and left them as empty lines in a ledger. I sat frozen, my skin crawling with sweat, the soft glow of the laptop screen painting my living room in pale blue. Then came the moment that broke me. Another file. I clicked. At first, just silence. Then a laugh. Not Ethan's. Higher, lighter. Familiar. Jules. My chest seized. I replayed it, again and again, straining to be sure. It was Jules, a small laugh, tucked between Ethan's clipped phrases. Proceeding as directed. Subject unaware. Halcyon oversight confirmed. And there it was again, Jules's laugh in the background, as though she were in the room. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing too loud in the dark. My mind spun, ricocheting between disbelief and betrayal. Could it be? Had she known? Had she been part of this all along? Or had Halcyon gotten to her, the way they had gotten to me? My pulse hammered as I tried to stitch the pieces together. Jules, warning me about people who weren't who they claimed to be. Jules, insisting I test the tea. Jules, looking at me with something she didn't say out loud. Had she been trying to save me? Or had she been steering me, guiding me toward the exact place Halcyon wanted me? I didn't know. All I knew was this: Ethan wasn't working alone. He wasn't just my husband. He was part of something larger, colder, calculated. And the woman I trusted most might be tied to it too. I slipped the USB from the laptop, tucked it deep into my pocket, and leaned against the wall, fighting to keep my breathing steady. Because now, the enemy wasn't just in my bed, it might also be sitting across the table from me, sipping iced tea, pretending to be my best friend. By morning, I couldn't look at Ethan without hearing those recordings. Every word of his clinical voice echoed in my head: execution window, widow narrative, eliminate liabilities. I waited until he left for his so-called consulting appointment, then pulled the USB back out. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I forced myself to keep going. The next folder wasn't audio. It was documents. Dozens of PDFs and spreadsheets, cleanly labeled, organized to the point of obsession. The first was titled Death Construction. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't a report. It was a manual. Step 1, create administrative fog. Sign the subject up for irrelevant mailers. File duplicate records under slightly different names. Add an incorrect middle initial here, a wrong eye color there. Small errors that piled up, so when the real death certificate appeared, no one would question it. Step 2, siphon personal data. Bank logins. Insurance policies. Employment contracts. Extract it quietly, night after night, while the subject slept. Step 3, stage the exit. Not a dramatic disappearance, not a loud crime scene. A tragedy that fit the world around it. A slip on a hiking trail. A gust of wind on a bridge. A car accident during rush hour. Something explainable. Something believable. Step 4, file the paperwork. The obituaries, the insurance claims, the legal signatures, all templated in advance, just waiting for names to be filled in. I scrolled, each line sinking me deeper into the nightmare. They called it paper death. The files went further. Real examples. A woman in Seattle, her obituary written before she was even gone. A man in Denver, his death certificate filed with a typo that delayed discovery for months. And every time, the assets transferred smoothly. Bank accounts drained. Homes sold. Insurance claimed. At the bottom of one document was a list titled Seattle Errors. Notes written in Ethan's handwriting. Wind gust recorded at 19 miles per hour, not 25. Witness statement inconsistent. Obit photo too grainy. Timeline disrupted. I realized what it meant. That woman, the one I saw in the news article, the one who looked like me, she hadn't been an accident. She'd been a test run, and Ethan was determined not to make the same mistakes with me. I opened another file. A spreadsheet. My name at the top of a row. Maya Grant. Face match, 86%. Widow narrative confirmed. Disposition, natural tragedy. Timeline, Thursday, Riverbend. Beside my name, a checklist. Banking data, verified. Employer records, verified. Beneficiaries aligned, verified. And one last box, empty, waiting to be filled, final cleanup. My breath caught as I read the note scribbled in the margin. Wrong eye color discrepancy, correct before filing. Wrong eye color. My eyes, hazel, the certificate listed them as brown. A mistake. A small one, but a mistake. And suddenly, I clung to it like a lifeline. Because maybe, just maybe, one small truth could unravel a web of lies. I closed the laptop, shoved the USB deep into my pocket, and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't just a name in his ledger. I was a liability. And Halcyon's job was to eliminate liabilities. The morning after I found the files, the world outside felt sharper, heavier, like every sound was a warning. I drove to work gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, my eyes flicking to every car that lingered too long in the mirror. It was raining, a thin gray drizzle that slicked the streets and blurred the stoplights. I pressed the brakes as I approached a four-way intersection, and that was when I felt it. Nothing. The pedal sank all the way to the floor. The car didn't stop. My heart punched into my throat as the vehicle lurched forward into the intersection. A pickup to my left fishtailed, horn blaring, tires shrieking against the wet asphalt. The world slowed to fragments, headlights flashing, water spraying, my hands jerking the wheel. The truck missed me by inches, the side mirror grazing my window with a metallic scream. My car jolted sideways, sliding to a stop against the curb. I sat there, frozen, my breath tearing out in panicked gasps. And then, a hand yanked the passenger door open. Ethan. Soaked from the rain, chest heaving, his face carved with something between terror and fury. He dragged me out of the seat, his arms tight around me, holding me like I was already half gone. What the hell happened? He demanded, shaking me just enough that my teeth clacked. The brakes, I gasped. They didn't work. He swore under his breath, a string of words I didn't recognize, sharp with an accent I'd only ever heard in whispers. Then he turned, storming toward the hood, slamming it shut after a glance inside. His hands were trembling. Not from the cold. Not from the rain. From anger. He came back, eyes cutting into me, and for a moment I thought, just for a moment, that anger was aimed at me. And then he pulled something from under my windshield wiper, a folded scrap of paper, soaked but still legible. He opened it with quick, jerking fingers, his jaw tightening as he read. He didn't hand it to me. He crumpled it in his fist, hard enough that the water dripped down his wrist. But I caught a glimpse before he shoved it into his pocket. Not Thursday. Tonight. Halcyon. My stomach dropped through the wet pavement beneath me. Ethan's eyes burned into mine, wild, almost pleading. Maya, listen to me. You need to pack a bag. Right now. We're leaving. Do you understand? I just stared at him, drenched and shivering, my heartbeat still ricocheting from the near collision. His arms were tight around me, protective in a way that made no sense. He looked less like a predator and more like a man cornered. But the note. The brakes. The recording. The box. If he wasn't the one who cut the lines, then someone else had. Someone who didn't want to wait until Thursday. I wanted to scream at him. To demand the truth. To shove every lie back into his face until he couldn't breathe. But instead, I nodded. My lips said yes while my mind screamed no, because one thing had become terrifyingly clear. I wasn't just a target. I was on borrowed time. And whether Ethan was my executioner or my shield, I didn't know anymore. We didn't leave town. Not that night. Not the next morning. Ethan insisted we had to wait, that moving too fast would draw the wrong eyes. I sat on the couch with a packed bag at my feet, my pulse thudding with every tick of the clock. Finally, when the sun dipped low and the house filled with shadows, he came into the room. His hair was damp from the shower, his shirt clinging to his chest, his face tighter than I'd ever seen it. He sat across from me, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke in a voice I barely recognized. "Maya, you deserve the truth." The words caught me off guard. Truth? From him? After everything? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like a man dragging air through broken glass. Yes, I've been taking your information. Your IDs, your bank details, your work credentials. That much is true. But it's not what you think. It's not about stealing from you. It's about protection. I almost laughed. Protection. The word tasted like poison on my tongue. Protection from what? I asked, my voice flat, brittle. His eyes flicked toward the window, scanning the street beyond, then back to me. From them. From Halcyon. You think I'm your enemy, but I've been trying to keep them away from you. They choose people. They build exits. And once you're marked, it doesn't matter what you do. You're already a ghost. I wanted to scream. To shake him. You're telling me drugging me every night was protection? Photographing my life, my work, my mother's locket, that was protection? He winced, like the words struck him. I had to make it look convincing. If I didn't, they would have sent someone else. Someone who wouldn't hesitate. Someone who wouldn't care. The words curled inside me, dangerous and sharp. Because for a moment, a single, treacherous moment, I wanted to believe him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small burner phone. The screen cracked, its casing scuffed. He set it on the table between us. Look. I leaned forward. The screen showed a string of messages from an unknown number saved only as H, timeline unchanged. Window Thursday. Verify assets. No complications tolerated. The most recent message froze me. Not Thursday. Tonight. The exact words from the note left under my wiper. Ethan's voice dropped, softer now, almost desperate. That wasn't me, Maya. I didn't touch your car. I didn't leave that note. They did. They're moving faster. I think, he stopped, swallowing hard. I think Jules is involved. Her name hit me like a stone to the chest. Jules? He nodded, eyes heavy, unreadable. She recruited me. Years ago. Before you. She brought me into Halcyon. She vouched for me. But lately, she's been handling oversight. She's the one they talk to when I can't deliver. I shook my head, my hands trembling in my lap. No. You're lying. She's my best friend. I thought so too, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. But Halcyon doesn't let people stay clean. They pull you in and they keep you there. If she's telling them you're suspicious, if she's feeding them updates, then we're already out of time. I stared at him, at the man I had loved, at the man who might have been planning my death, or might have been the only thing standing in the way of it. And then my eyes caught on the table beside him. A small steel case. Unmarked. Familiar. What's that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His gaze dropped to it, then back to me. For the first time, he hesitated. His lips parted, closed, parted again. But no words came. Because whatever was inside that case, it was the one thing he couldn't explain. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. Ethan lay beside me, his breathing deep and steady, but I stayed awake, staring into the dark, feeling every nerve in my body hum like a wire about to snap. By morning, I knew I couldn't keep circling questions. I needed answers. And there was only one person who could give them to me. I called Jules. My voice was calm, too calm, as if the weight pressing on my chest belonged to someone else. Can we meet? I asked. Somewhere quiet. She didn't hesitate. Of course. Tell me when. We chose the botanical garden. Public, open, safe. At least that's what I told myself. When I arrived, the air smelled of wet soil and blooming roses. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the far side of the grounds, but here, in the shaded paths, it was quieter. Jules was already waiting, perched on a bench beneath a trellis of climbing ivy. She looked tired, her hair pulled back, her eyes ringed with shadows that makeup couldn't hide. I sat beside her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavier than words. Finally, I turned. I need you to tell me the truth. About Ethan. About Halcyon. Her head jerked, her lips parting, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted away, to the path, to the trees, anywhere but me. I found the recordings, I pressed. I know about the files. The obituaries. The spreadsheet with my name on it. Jules. I heard your laugh. She froze. Her hands knotted in her lap. For a heartbeat, I thought she might deny it. Pretend. Gaslight me the way Ethan had. But she didn't. Her shoulders slumped. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't want this for you. The ground tilted beneath me. So it's true. Her eyes shone, wet with something between shame and fear. I never thought he'd pick you. I never thought you'd be part of it. I tried to warn you, Maya. I did. But once Halcyon marks someone, there's no undoing it. My pulse roared in my ears. Anger, heartbreak, betrayal, all of it coiled inside me like a snake ready to strike. You brought him to me. Didn't you? You put him in my life. Her silence was answer enough. I stood, my hands shaking, fury rising like a tide. Why? Why me? She finally looked at me then, her face twisted with something raw. Because they had my brother. Because he owed money, more than I could ever pay. They said if I delivered one person, just one, they'd clear it. And then you met Ethan, and you looked happy, and I thought, maybe he could love you. Maybe you could be different. But Halcyon doesn't care about love, Maya. They care about paper. About numbers. About clean exits. My throat burned, my vision blurred, but before I could answer, movement caught my eye. 2 cars. Dark sedans, gliding silently down opposite ends of the garden's service road. They parked at either exit, doors cracking open. Men in suits stepped out, their gazes sweeping the path. Jules's hand twitched in her lap. Under the cover of her coat, she was typing something on her phone. What did you do? I hissed. Her eyes flooded with tears. I didn't have a choice. They know you know. They're here for both of us now. Panic surged. My instinct screamed at me to run. But Jules reached into her pocket, pulled out a small brass key, and shoved it into my hand. Storage Unit E17, she whispered fiercely. If I disappear, it's all in there. Everything. Don't waste it. Footsteps echoed closer. Men's voices. Jules's grip tightened around mine, her eyes wide, desperate. Go, Maya. Now. And I ran. I ran through the winding paths, past roses and ivy and fountains that sparkled in the morning sun, clutching the key so hard it cut into my palm. Behind me, I heard her voice one last time. Shouting. A distraction. A sacrifice. And then, nothing. The storage unit was 3 blocks outside of town, hidden in a row of metal garages that all looked the same, gray doors, padlocks gleaming under a weak strip of sunlight. Number E17 sat at the end, forgotten, ordinary. My hand shook as I slid the key into the lock. The door rolled upward with a grinding scream, the sound bouncing down the empty row. For a moment, I just stood there, staring into the dark, breathing in the musty air that rushed out. Then I stepped inside. It wasn't boxes of old furniture or bags of clothes. It was an archive. Plastic bins lined the walls, each labeled with meticulous detail. Height ranges. Eye colors. Blood types. Files stacked neatly, marked with names I didn't recognize. Some bins contained clothes folded with precision, jackets, shoes, scarves, all ordinary, all terrifying in their order. On a table at the center sat binders filled with paperwork. I flipped one open and felt the bottom of my stomach drop. It was a template obituary. Blank spaces left for a name, an age, a hometown, a surviving spouse. Another was a death certificate, already stamped with the state seal, waiting only for the details to be filled in. There were dozens of them. One binder held eulogies. Words meant to be spoken at funerals, stripped of meaning, interchangeable. She loved the outdoors. He was always smiling. She made everyone feel at home. Generic phrases crafted to sound personal, to fill the silence of grief with something that felt familiar but meant nothing. On the far wall hung a corkboard. Maps, photographs, news clippings pinned side by side. And there, in the center, a photograph that made my knees weaken. The river bend. A drone still of the bridge, captured from above. Arrows drawn in red ink pointed to wind patterns, to the weak spots in the railing, to the section of slick boards. Notes scrawled beside it, Thursday, optimal conditions. Widow narrative intact. My name was at the bottom of the page. I staggered back, my hand pressed to my mouth. They had planned every detail. They hadn't just written my death. They had rehearsed it. On the desk sat a tablet, its screen dark. I pressed the button, and it flickered to life. A logo appeared, Halcyon Management Portal. My breath caught as the dashboard loaded. Columns stretched across the screen. Job number. Target. Timeline. Status. My eyes darted down the list. Names. Dozens of them. All marked with statuses like in progress or completed. And then, my name, target, Maya Grant. Status, advanced, pending confirmation. I scrolled, my hands shaking. Next to mine was a status update box. Notes typed in clean, clinical sentences. Subject compliant. Ingestion successful. Assets verified. Thursday window confirmed. The line that froze me was at the bottom, transition overseen by Hale. Director Hale. Whoever she wasn't just a shadow. She was the one pulling the strings. I set the tablet down, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might echo through the metal walls. That was when I saw it, tucked into the corner of the corkboard, a photograph. Ethan and Jules, standing side by side, arms slung around each other, smiling at the camera. The photo was dated 5 years earlier. Scribbled beneath in black ink, training, phase 2. My stomach dropped. They hadn't just known each other. They'd been partners. 4 years. The air felt too thin, my lungs struggling to drag in enough. My best friend. My husband. Both tied to this place, to this archive of death. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Outside. I spun toward the door as a shadow stretched across the thin crack of sunlight at the bottom. The storage unit door rattled, and then slowly, it lifted. Ethan stood there, framed by daylight, his eyes locked on mine. He looked at the corkboard, at the files spread across the table, then back at me. His voice was low, rough, steady. "You were never supposed to see this." And before I could move, another voice slid in behind him. Smooth, calm, commanding. "Neither were you." A woman stepped into the light. Immaculate. Controlled. Eyes like sharpened glass. "Maya Grant," she said, as if reading me off a file. "Meet Director Hale." Her presence filled the unit like smoke, calm, suffocating, impossible to ignore. She wore a tailored gray coat, her dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, her posture so precise it was as if she'd been carved out of marble. Two men in black suits flanked her, silent, expressionless. They didn't need to speak, their presence said enough. Power. Control. Hale's eyes swept the room once, taking in the bins, the binders, the tablet still glowing on the table. Then she looked at me, and for a moment I felt like nothing more than another name in her spreadsheet. "You weren't supposed to get this far." Her voice was smooth, almost soothing, but threaded with steel. That's the problem with liabilities. They think curiosity is survival, when in fact it only accelerates the end. I forced myself to stand taller, though my knees wanted to buckle. "So that's what I am to you." "A liability." A faint smile curved her lips. "Every system has waste. Errors. Noise. You, Maya, are noise." I glanced at Ethan. He stood stiffly beside her, his face unreadable, caught between anger and fear. Hale followed my gaze, her expression sharpening. "Don't blame him too much. He was efficient, until he wasn't. Sloppiness is contagious." Attachment, she let the word hang in the air like a curse. Attachment compromises everything. Ethan flinched, his jaw tightening. Hale stepped closer, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. She stopped just a breath away from me, her perfume sharp, expensive, clinical. "Here's what's going to happen. Thursday stays. The Riverbend. We complete the narrative as designed. You play your part. You slip, you fall, the paperwork clears. And in exchange, I make sure it's painless. Quick. Clean." My chest constricted, but I held her gaze. "And if I don't?" She tilted her head, almost curious. "Then tonight. Less elegant. Messier. But the outcome doesn't change. You'll be gone, and Halcyon will move forward." Her calm was more terrifying than shouting ever could be. She wasn't threatening me. She was explaining procedure. I swallowed, forcing my voice steady. "Why me? Why us?" She studied me for a long moment, her eyes sharp as glass. "Because you fit. Because you were convenient. Because your life, your assets, your story aligned with the demand. We don't choose people, we choose patterns. You just happened to be the right shape at the right time." The words sliced through me. I wasn't special. I wasn't targeted out of malice or revenge. I was math. A line item. Replaceable. Behind her, one of the operatives began pulling files from the shelves, stacking binders into a black duffel. Another started sweeping the bins into the back of a van idling outside. Evidence disappearing, erased as efficiently as the lives that fed it. I forced my breathing slow, hiding the panic clawing at my throat. And what if the story doesn't hold? What if the paperwork gets challenged? What if the errors show? Hale's smile widened, cold and thin. "We don't make errors. That's what Ethan's supposed to ensure. And when he doesn't, we clean up. Thoroughly." I wanted to scream at him then, to hurl every betrayal into the air. But his eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something crack beneath the mask. Regret. Guilt. Maybe even love. I latched onto it, because I had nothing else. I took a step forward, lifting my chin. "You're wrong." Her eyebrow arched. "About what?" My hand tightened around my phone in my pocket. About errors. For the briefest second, confusion flickered across her face. And then I said it. I already sent everything. The files, the recordings, the spreadsheets. They're on a timer. If I don't enter the code by noon tomorrow, they go public. Journalists. Investigators. People who will see through your perfect little narratives. Her smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew sharper. She studied me the way a scientist studies a lab rat that's just figured out the maze. Clever, she murmured. But bluffs are fragile things, and you don't strike me as someone who'd risk everything on one. My pulse hammered, but I didn't blink. Try me. Silence filled the unit. Ethan shifted beside her, his shoulders tense, his jaw clenched tight. The operatives froze mid-motion, waiting for her command. Finally, Hale stepped back. She smoothed a hand down her coat, her calm restored, her control absolute. 12 hours, she said softly. You have 12 hours to reconsider. You'll make the right choice. They always do. She turned, signaling to her men. One by one, they filed out, loading the duffel into the van. Hale paused at the door, her gaze cutting into me like a blade. Enjoy your last sunrise, Maya. After that, you're nothing but paper. The door clanged shut behind her, leaving only silence. Ethan exhaled, shaky, almost broken. His eyes met mine, but I turned away. Because I wasn't sure if he was my jailer, or my only way out. Thursday came like a slow-moving storm. Every hour felt borrowed, every minute heavy with the weight of what I knew. By the time the sun sank below the horizon, my body was trembling with exhaustion, but my mind was razor-sharp. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. If Halcyon wanted me erased, they'd find me anywhere. The only way forward was through. The Riverbend Bridge was waiting. It arched over the water like a spine of old bones, its wooden boards slick with rain, the rails rusting beneath the weight of time. The current below churned black, swollen from days of storm. Wind hissed through the trees, whistling low, like the world itself was warning me not to step forward. But I stepped anyway. Ethan was already there, his figure a shadow cut against the dim glow of the bridge lights. He turned when he saw me, his eyes catching the faint silver reflection of the water below. You came. His voice carried through the night, steady but laced with something like relief. I didn't move closer. I didn't have a choice, did I? He swallowed hard, taking a cautious step forward. You always had a choice, Maya. Just not the choices you wanted. The words made me shiver, though not from the cold. And then, headlights flickered from the far side of the bridge. A van door slid open. Shadows emerged, Hale's operatives, 2 of them, their silhouettes stark against the glow, and then she stepped out. Director Hale. Immaculate, composed, every inch of her as precise as the night in the storage unit. Her voice carried easily, calm and final. Maya Grant. The window is closing. It's time. The men began to move, slow and steady, guiding me toward the railing. But what they didn't know, what Hale didn't know, was that I had prepared too. I reached into my pocket and pressed the trigger. A flare shot upward, bursting in a spray of crimson light. It screamed across the sky, bright enough to burn through the night, bright enough to draw eyes from the nearby trail. Within seconds, voices echoed from the darkness. Hikers, drawn by the flare. Witnesses. Hale's perfect accident had just become public. Her expression didn't flicker, but her voice sharpened. Clever. But attention doesn't save you. Attention only makes you bleed slower. The operatives moved faster now. One reached for my arm, but I twisted away, gripping the small clip I had hidden in my sleeve, a climbing carabiner I had laced with a GPS tracker and a thin capsule of dye. I snapped it onto his glove. He shoved me back, not even noticing. Ethan surged forward then, blocking the second operative. For a moment, I couldn't tell which side he was on, his movements sharp, precise, trained. But then he turned, his voice low and urgent. Run. Hale's voice cut through the chaos. Don't let her leave this bridge. The operatives lunged again. I stumbled, my hand slamming against the rail, the wood slick and cold beneath my palm. The river roared below, dark and hungry. Hale stepped closer, her heels clicking against the boards. Her eyes met mine, unblinking. This can still end cleanly. Don't fight what you already know is inevitable. I spat the words back at her. Nothing about this is clean. The operatives closed in, and I realized the truth. This was it. The bridge, the wind, the narrative, it was all here, ready to swallow me. Then came the sound that split the night, sirens. Wailing, closer, louder. And behind me, a voice. Jules's voice. Desperate, breaking. She's here. Somebody help. I spun, and there she was at the end of the bridge, her face pale, her hands raised. She had called them. She had done the one thing Halcyon hadn't predicted. She had made noise. The operatives froze, just for a beat, thrown off by the growing light of approaching cruisers. Hale's eyes narrowed, the mask cracking for the first time. You stupid girl, she hissed, not at me, but at Jules. And then she moved. It happened fast, too fast. Hale lunged toward me, her hand gripping my wrist, her weight shoving me back against the rail. The boards groaned beneath us. My body teetered over the edge, the river spinning below. Ethan grabbed her arm, yanking, but she clung tighter. Her nails dug into my skin, her face inches from mine. You were never meant to matter, she whispered. The rail gave a low, cracking moan. Hale's foot slipped on the slick wood. And then she was gone. But not completely. Her hand still clamped around my wrist, dragging me toward the edge with her. The weight of her body pulled me forward, my grip on the rail burning as I fought to hold on. Ethan! I screamed. He reached for me, his hand closing around my arm. The three of us locked in a deadly chain, Hale dragging me down, me caught between, Ethan straining to pull me back. The water roared louder, the sirens closer, the world spinning in a blur of noise and fear. And I realized, in that moment, that Ethan had to choose. Save her. Or save me. My arm burned where Hale's nails dug into me, her grip like iron, her weight pulling me closer to the edge with every breath. The railing groaned, wood splitting beneath the strain. I could hear the river below, hungry, violent, waiting to devour us both. Let go. I screamed, twisting, kicking, fighting against her. But she only pulled harder, her teeth clenched, her eyes blazing with fury. Ethan's hand gripped my other arm, muscles straining, his jaw set in determination. The tendons in his neck stood out like cords as he fought to keep me from sliding over. For a second, the world held still, three lives tangled together, balanced on the edge of destruction. Hale's voice cut through the chaos, a rasping hiss. If you love her, let her go. She's already gone. Her words seared through me, but it was Ethan who answered. His voice was low, raw, shaking. Not this time. With one violent motion, he shifted his grip, wrenching me upward with every ounce of strength he had left. Hale shrieked as her hand slipped. My body slammed back onto the slick boards of the bridge, air rushing into my lungs in a jagged sob. And Hale, Director Hale, plunged downward. The river swallowed her in a burst of spray, the dye capsule I had clipped to the operative's glove exploding in her grasp as she hit the water. Bright ink bloomed in the current like a wound, staining her, marking her. I lay gasping on the boards, staring at the night sky, trembling with shock. Ethan knelt beside me, his chest heaving, his face twisted with something I couldn't name, relief, guilt, maybe both. Then the sirens reached us. Red and blue lights flared against the trees, washing over the bridge in violent flashes. Officers spilled out, weapons raised, shouting commands. The operatives froze, their masks of calm cracking under the pressure of real exposure. One tried to run, but a flashlight beam pinned him, a voice bellowing, hands where we can see them. Within seconds, they were on the ground, wrists cuffed, their silent control shattered. And then the officers turned to us. To me. I sat up, my hair plastered to my face, my wrist bleeding from Hale's grip. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. She's in the water. Downstream. You'll see the ink. They rushed to the edge, radios crackling, calling for a rescue unit. Searchlights swept across the dark waves, catching flashes of red dye blooming in the current. One officer turned back, his gaze steady on me. She won't get far. I nodded, my whole body shaking, the adrenaline crashing through me in waves. Beside me, Ethan was silent. He stared at the river, his eyes hollow, his jaw clenched as though he knew the story wasn't over. When the officers turned to him, demanding names, explanations, he finally spoke. His voice was calm, but stripped of all pretense. I can give you everything. The names, the files, the clients. But he glanced at me, his throat working. She had nothing to do with it. She was a target. That's all. My chest tightened, because even now, even with Hale gone and the operatives in cuffs, I didn't know what he truly was. Savior? Traitor? Both? The police pulled us to our feet, separating us, ushering us toward the waiting cars. Jules emerged from the shadows then, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she tried to explain. She had called. She had shouted for help. She had broken Halcyon's code of silence. Her eyes met mine, wide and pleading. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but in that moment, I understood, she had chosen me, finally, when it mattered most. The next hours blurred. Statements, recordings, flashbulbs of memory stitched together by adrenaline. Officers bagged evidence from the storage unit. They collected the binders, the tablet, the USB drives. My own name stared back at me from one of the files as they slid it into an evidence bag. When they opened the metal box Ethan had hidden in our house, I saw the stack of cash, the passports, the photographs of other women, all of it spread across the table under fluorescent light. Each one a story like mine. Each one a woman who hadn't escaped. And then I saw it. A folder with my name. Inside, every piece of me. My birth certificate. My social security card. My work IDs. Even photos of me I didn't remember being taken, me leaving the office, me unlocking my car, me brushing hair from my face at a stoplight. My life, documented for disposal. A detective lifted the folder, his expression grim. He's been planning this for months. Maybe longer. I wanted to scream. To cry. To collapse. But I stood still, my hands clenched, my chest heaving, because the only thing louder than my fear was my rage. Ethan watched me from across the room, his wrists cuffed, his eyes dark and unreadable. For a moment, our gazes locked, and I saw the truth written in his expression. He had chosen me tonight. But not out of love. Not out of loyalty. Out of necessity. And though Hale was gone, her words echoed in my head. Noise. Error. Waste. I wasn't gone. I wasn't erased. But the story wasn't finished yet. 6 months later, I live in a different city. Different streets, different skyline, different life. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even the same person who once sat in a kitchen sipping tea from a blue ceramic mug, convinced her husband was the safest place she'd ever known. The truth is, she's gone. And I don't mourn her. The trial dragged on for months, endless hearings, and evidence files thick enough to build walls. Ethan, if that was even his real name, cut a deal. He handed over everything he had on Halcyon, their accounts, their contacts, the names of other operators. He traded secrets for survival, for the faintest chance at leniency. But me? I didn't trade. I told everything. I gave them the USBs, the files from the storage unit, the transcripts I'd transcribed through shaking hands in the middle of the night. And for the first time since all of this began, my silence became noise. Noise loud enough to break Halcyon's pattern. Director Hale survived. They dragged her out of the river, soaked and furious, her gloves stained with ink that bloomed like blood across her skin. She didn't speak at her arraignment. She didn't need to. The evidence spoke for her. Conspiracy. Fraud. Attempted murder. Racketeering. The charges stacked so high it would take a lifetime to climb out from beneath them. I watched her once, in the courtroom. She turned, her eyes cutting into me like she could still bend me into silence. But I didn't look away. I wanted her to see that I was still here. That her liability hadn't been erased. Jules. Jules is harder. She testified. She told the truth, even the parts that broke me to hear. She admitted how she had brought Ethan into my life, how she thought she was protecting her brother, how she told herself it would never touch me. She wept as she spoke, her voice cracking, her hands trembling. Some nights, I still hear her voice in my head. I never thought he'd pick you. Do I forgive her? I don't know. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a road, uneven and steep, and some days I can't even see the path. But she chose me in the end. When it mattered most, she made noise, and maybe that's enough, for now. As for me, I left the house. I couldn't stay, not with its hidden panels and hollow walls, its shadows filled with ghosts. I packed what I could, left the rest, and drove south until the air felt different. Now, I rent a small apartment overlooking the ocean. The waves crash against the shore every night, steady and relentless, reminding me that some forces can't be bent or silenced. I volunteer at a victim advocacy center, speaking to women who've been deceived, manipulated, erased in smaller, quieter ways. I tell them my story, piece by piece, not to scare them but to remind them that survival isn't weakness, it's rebellion. Sometimes, I even laugh again. Not often. Not easily. But it comes, sharp and unexpected, like sunlight breaking through cloud. The hospital bracelet Ethan kept in that velvet box. I learned later it really had belonged to his sister. She died from a clerical error, a wrong blood type listed on a chart. And maybe that was why Halcyon appealed to him. Maybe he convinced himself he was fixing the system, perfecting it, stripping out the errors. But somewhere along the way, he became the error. I don't drink chamomile tea anymore. The smell alone is enough to make my stomach turn. But some nights, when the world is quiet and I want to remind myself that I'm still here, I boil water, pour it into a plain white mug, and let it steam. No honey. No ritual. Just me, breathing in the heat, alive. On my balcony, a small bell hangs where the wind chime used to be. It rings clear, sharp, honest. Not a warped melody twisted by the breeze, but a single note of truth. Every time it sounds, I remind myself, I wasn't paper. I wasn't erased. I was noise. And noise is what saved me.